C'est un réseau monétaire numérique dominant dans le monde. Elle va augmenter d'un facteur de 10 à 100 et je vais juste le garder comme Apple, comme Facebook, comme Google, comme Microsoft. Je vais le garder comme mon grand monopole technologique pour la prochaine décennie. Et il va osciller un peu et je vais l'acheter lors des baisses. Le point de vue maximaliste est que ce sont des droits de propriété pour 8 milliards de personnes. C'est la plus grande opportunité du 21e siècle. C'est l'autonomisation économique pour chaque entreprise, chaque pays, chaque famille, chaque individu, n'est-ce pas? Je vais le soutenir à chaque instant, de toutes les manières possibles, pour toujours. D'accord? Et donc, vous parlez à un maximaliste ici. Je suis au-delà de l'investisseur. Vous savez, ce n'est pas ma peu qui est en jeu. Je suis au-delà de ça. Mon âme est en jeu. Mais
bienvenue dans cette nouvelle édition de Salarié affranchi. J'ai l'honneur de vous présenter un extrait de l'entretien entre David Lynn et Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor met davantage d'accent sur la patience, sur l'adaptabilité, sur la conviction, sur la gestion des risques et il prend en perspective 3 types d'investisseurs ou bien de personnes qui interagissent avec la blockchain et les cryptomonnaies. Il prend l'exemple des traders, il prend l'exemple d'un investisseur et il prend l'exemple d'un maximaliste, d'un Bitcoin maximaliste qu'il est. Il met l'accent sur la patience parce qu'il pense davantage qu'avec le temps, le Bitcoin atteindra 10 millions de dollars et il offre des perspectives de route qui mèneraient le Bitcoin à 10 millions de dollars. La raison pour laquelle j'ai fait cet extrait, c'est juste pour éduquer cette communauté, de comprendre que les shitcoins, les mid-coins ne vous mèneront à rien. Et je le dis avec expérience parce que nous avons commis ces erreurs il y a plus de 10 ans. Et je propose, si ce n'est pas un conseil financier, de vous focaliser davantage sur les fondamentaux, de comprendre où le monde s'en va et les perspectives qu'offre la blockchain Bitcoin. Je ne suis pas un maximaliste, mais néanmoins, je vous invite à suivre cet extrait de Michael Saylor.
Get started.
We'll come back to policies on digital assets in just a bit, but just speaking of Bessent in the current administration, Trump just earlier today made a comment that he said the Fed should cut rates to ease the economy's transition to tariffs. The president is pushing for rates to be lower. On the one hand, tariffs do not go well with equities and risk assets. On the other hand, if the Fed listens to the president, either directly or indirectly, we could get more liquidity. How do these competing forces impact Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is every macro trader's favorite asset because they can trade it 24/7, 365. They can trade it anywhere in the world. They can trade it with any amount of leverage, and they can cross-collateralize it with any other asset. And they talk about it with legal impunity because it's a commodity. It's not a security. And so that makes it the most attractive of all assets to trade on a trend. If you think there's a missile attack coming, you want to sell it. If you think the missile attack was overblown and there's not going to be a war, you want to buy it. I think when people are panicking, they tend to want to do a leverage coin, looser money environment. They'll turn the other way. So I do think that interest rates coming in or the expectation of interest rates coming in is very bullish asset. And there'll be some points where you'll probably see it rip up because of that. I think that this is a pro-business, deregulation, low regulation, pro-business, low tax, pro-innovation administration, in general and everything they're doing. All of those things will be good for Bitcoin over time. I think deregulation is very good. I think low interest rates are very good.
Just a quick follow-up to that. There was a counter-argument I've heard from other crypto investors that a pro-business administration is actually bearish for Bitcoin short-term because the central bank does not need to ease as much. Perhaps the recession could be stalled by pro-business policies and liquidity flows would not have a positive impact on Bitcoin because of that. How do you respond to that?
I think there's a lot of double reverse logic that takes place in the macro trading environment.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you knew there was lots of inflation over the long term, the number one thing to hold is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But when people print a big inflation number, Bitcoin will trade down in the short term. But the double reverse logic is inflation is high, therefore the interest rates are going up, therefore money is getting slurped out, therefore I should find something to sell, so I'll sell Bitcoin. And that's why I would say there are basically two ways to think about Bitcoin. Actually, there's three views. There's the trader, there's the investor, and there's the maximalist. Okay, the trader says it's an asset, I can get a handle on it, I can 50x lever it long and short. They're obsessing over whether or not good news is coming, because good news is bad news and bad news is good news, right? And then they want to make sure they're the first one to get the bad news so they can treat it as good news so they can get out of the trade before the bad news manifests or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you're one of those traders, you know who you are and more power to you. I'm not that guy. Then the investor view is, this is the dominant digital monetary network in the world. It's going to go up by a factor of 10 to 100. And I'm just going to hold it like Apple, like Facebook, like Google, like Microsoft. I'm going to hold it like my big tech monopoly for the next decade. And it's going to jerk around a bit. And I'm going to buy it on dips. The maximalist view is, this is property rights for 8 billion people. This is the greatest opportunity of the 21st century. This is economic empowerment for every business, every country, every family, every individual, right? I'm going to support it at all times, every way I can, forever, okay? And so you're talking to a maximalist here. I'm beyond the investor. It's not my skin is in the game. I'm beyond that. My soul is in the game. But I think that Thomas Lee, he's done some good work, and he says that Bitcoin generates all of its gains in like 10 days a year. Fundstrat Thomas Lee. And that just means that, somewhere like 98, 97% of the time, nothing is happening and you're waiting for something to happen. And I would say every macro theory about if the bad thing happens, that's good. And if the good thing happens, that's bad. And if enough bad things happen, that's really good, because then a bad thing will happen, which will be good for us in the midterm. I get it. It's all true. But I just don't choose to play the game. My view of this is that's a game for professionals. And, Howard Marks, he says the problem with all these day traders is the stock goes from 10 to 11, and the guy bought it at 10 and sold it at 11. And then it goes from 22 to 23, and he bought it at 22 and sold it at 23. And then it goes from 33 to 32, and he shorted it at 33. And he brags that he made $3.
Yeah.
But the problem with the whole thing is if he just bought it at 10, he would have made like 10x that much money with no stress, no anxiety, and no risk. And so I tend to think, look, Bitcoin's going to grind up 30 to 60% a year for the next 20 years. And my long-term risk cost of capital is like 29% for 20 years. That being the case, rather than try to time the market, it seems to me like a better idea would be go mortgage your house for 30 years at 3% interest or 6% interest, and then make an investment for 30 years that where you have 6% cost of capital and get 30% return on the capital, and you're getting 24% boost. So I think it's much better to figure out how you raise capital and lever the trade, or how you build a business that actually cashes in on that volatility, instead of being the day trader trying to guess the volatility, because it just seems like, it's a fool's errand for the average person.
I understand.
In one of your interviews, you said when you learned about Bitcoin, you couldn't sleep because you were just afraid somebody else would learn it and they would buy it. You couldn't buy it anymore. But now you are the main force. I would argue that the reason why everybody's buying Bitcoin